Hey, Greg and Greg, sound check real quick.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I was just coming in the house there. My calendar was wrong for some reason, so all good though.
Oh, good timing. 5 minutes beforehand.
Yeah, helpful.
Hello.
Hey, Art.
Good morning.
Good morning. We'll be getting going in about 3-4 minutes.
Cool.
Let some more people kind of jump in here and do their thing.
Awesome.
I just made that announcement, and I know there's a bunch of the IDGi people that were interested in joining, like Michael Valiant and all.
Yep.
Hey,
Greg,
you doing all right?
Awesome. Are you in Edmonton now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just in town for a few days. I was in Iceland for a bit, which was pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I happened to catch a photo of you. You caught an awesome fish or something. Was that in Iceland?
Yeah, that was a sea trout. I went fishing in Iceland. Yeah, that was super fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, it's been and then I'm off again here shortly, so it's been pretty busy. But good. How about yourself? How's stuff? Working hard, I assume, on the game.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah. Off to an awesome start in production. We're kicking ass actually. It's really exciting. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we talked about before back in the day, knowing the platform and kind of what you want to do, it makes development like 800 times easier.
Infinitely easier and more exciting because we can just make all these calls early on and feel confident about them, right?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I guess I'm going to interview you for most of the time. Probably spend some time at the end for questions, though, I'd expect. So
sure, definitely, yeah. I know the Unreal Engine is amazing too. It's just an incredible piece of software, man. Like I've never worked in a better engine. The Unreal 4 is just whew.
Yeah, no, it's what. And are you guys changing the art direction at all, or just maintaining art direction, but maybe having more fidelity if you want?
Yeah, more fidelity. More fidelity. We're just pushing it a bit further. Keeping the same theme, the idea of the IDGi on satellite having limited bandwidth to show details and that kind of thing. That's what drove the art direction for the first game. That and like having two artists too. But we're sort of using that as a baseline, and then we're just upping the fidelity a bit in terms of polygonal detail and that kind of thing.
Hey guys, should I have someone actually recording this?
Fine with me.
All right. Rhea, Sugar.
It's fine with the.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I guess we can get going. This is Greg Zeschuk and Gregory MacMartin. Greg Zeschuk is the founder. He was the vice president of BioWare until he retired, and now he lives his life drinking beer and apparently traveling the world. And then Great Bird over there is actually Greg Martin. He is the CEO of Aaron Dimensional Games. They just had a successful crowdfunding campaign, a FIG campaign with their sequel to their first game consortium called The Tower. I guess take it away.
Hey folks, this is we have to figure out. I guess we'll introduce ourselves a few times. This is Greg Z, and I'll be interviewing Greg M. Any initial words, Greg? Greg and Greg.
Not Greg M. I think some of you may have been here yesterday when I did my 1-hour talk. That's pretty much it. Yeah, I'll be answering Greg Z's questions.
All right, cool. So I thought we'd start with a bit of like sort of general background on Greg M. and kind of learn a bit about his background and then dig into the game. So to kind of give you an idea, like how did we get here today? So how did you get into gaming? How did you start? How did that all occur?
Well, I've been playing games since the Atari days back in the '80s when I was like 5. And so I played them voraciously. Got into as soon as there was an XT, I had an early XT back in the Philippines, and played the old Wizardries and the Bard's Tales and so all the immersive games back in the day. Yeah. Play. Then I got into pen and paper role playing games. So hardcore imagination stuff was always driving me as a kid all the way through high school. Also, my parents yanked me around from place. I lived in the Philippines, lived in England, lived all over the place, and I think that getting that world perspective and seeing the whole world as opposed to being just clustered in a public school in Canada somewhere gave me a really big perspective, and I felt like I didn't have any connection with people at school, high school especially. So I sort of really heavily dived into my imagination, and naturally, video games are a fit both for playing and eventually for making. And it was kind of, I mean, it's kind of like cosmic coincidence or cosmic, I don't know, just luck, I guess, that a couple of my best buddies in high school were basically, they were programmers, very, very, very smart programmers, and they were inspired to make an engine. They saw what Carmack was doing with like the Wolfenstein engine, and then soon after that, the Doom engine, and they were sort of tried reverse engineering some of that stuff and built their own engine. And then they had an editor, and I started messing with the editor, and I had a blast actually making levels. This is back when you like join lines together and then form sectors with floors and ceilings, positions and that kind of thing, and form pseudo 3D spaces. And I absolutely loved it. Took to it like flies to what. But and then just I never looked back. Basically, so I was right out of high school in 1995. That turned into a game called Radix, Radix, Beyond the Void, which is one of those first sort of as a shareware 3-episode first-person shooter, a combination of Descent and Doom. And I'm still part of that game to this day. It had a bit of a cult following. It never really did take off commercially, but certainly myself and John Maver both continued off. The two other guys sort of went back to school and whatnot, but we continued. And after that, I made Aftershock for Quake. It's actually Maver wrote the thread editor, one of the very first editors written in the public for the Quake engine, and I made levels with his editor. And we ended up making a whole bunch of levels, made a bunch of new textures, then packaged the whole thing up as something called Aftershock for Quake, and made a deal with a distributor to put this box on the shelf right next to Quake, and actually sold really well. And I remember getting remember it was Christmas of 1996. I was still living at my parents' place, and we had shipped Aftershock. It was out in the stores. It was selling. And I remember getting a royalty check from that deal. And I remember, I'll never forget, it came in the mail, and I opened it up, and it was like a $45,000 Canadian US check. I was like, wow. Holy crap.
Yeah. You chose wisely.
What's that?
You chose wisely. It chose the right business.
Yeah. Yeah. Maver and I look back at that, and we actually kind of think that we may have been owed a lot more than what we actually got. But back then we were kids, and to me that check was like golden. It was just like, oh my God. So yeah, that sort of reaffirmed that, yeah, I chose wisely, and that my career chose the right path. So at that point, you could say those two projects, you could say I was kind of truly indie. It was all independent stuff. And then at that point, I went and joined Cave Dog, and we started working on Amen: The Awakening. It was to be this really big, grandiose, first-person, story-driven sci-fi game. And that lasted for almost 3 years. And that's when actually you and I met, right? Somewhere in there, I was going to CGDC, as it was known at the time, if you remember.
Yeah, I think it was in Seattle area. Was that right?
Was it in Seattle? I don't think. No, I think it was. I think it was still down. CGDC was never in Seattle. It was in.
I thought it was at a special. I thought it was at a specific event in Seattle. I can't remember. Like they started doing spin-offs once in a while. But yeah, that was. I remember. Like I still remember the meeting, but I can never place exactly where it was. I'm always confused by that. So.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, it was in between talks, in between roundtables. Yeah, and you chilled out on a couch or something, and I just started chatting, and and started swapping stories right after that. I remember. That's right. And I'm pretty sure, almost positive it was CGC, and it was somewhere in California. It was one of the California.
Probably like Santa Clara, or when it was like.
Yeah.
San Jose, one of those.
San Jose, it might have been. Yeah, was it in San Jose for a few years? I think it was, right? Yeah.
It was. It was like. Yeah, it was like a few different places before it ended up in San Francisco. Like further stuff around. Yeah,
it took a while for it. It didn't get upgraded to Moscone until well into the 2000s, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So that's where I sort of at that point, as I was getting paid to work on games. So I was getting a paycheck. There was a huge sum of money from the sale of Ron Gilbert's humongous company to at the time. At the time it was GT Interactive. And they were given carte blanche, and you can fund whatever you want. So we had this huge team built up and made all this technology from scratch. And it was an amazing project, learned an unbelievable amount of stuff. But then the company got bought again, and the company that bought them had no idea what they had, and the entire company just collapsed under itself. All the talent left, and it was just a bit of a travesty. Somewhere in there, also, I actually was involved in the early days of forming Relic Entertainment. Homeworld, I actually conceived of the original Homeworld name and game concept and design document and everything else, and I came really close to actually founding Relic with Alex Garden up here in Vancouver.
Yeah.
very strange moment in my life actually, where it was like, do that or go make it or make the same end game, right? um, but anyways, yeah, and then I went to Relic for a while after Cave Dog collapsed. I actually worked there as well, and then I went to had a brief stint at Turbine and worked on Lord of the Rings Online for a bit, and that was an eye-opening experience. I know you've worked on obviously a number of MMOs, especially the massive Star Wars one, right?
Yeah.
That was the last thing you worked on before you retired, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was. My experience with an MMO game was was Lord of the Rings Online. And I tell you, people that work on those games, at least at Turbine at the time, they speak a different language. They speak a completely different language.
Well, no, it's interesting because like as you know, like it's actually not a game like we would make. It's an ongoing project, so it never actually stops. And that once you wrap your head around that piece, it totally changes how you think about everything. And then the other piece being just. It's like, server client, like back end, like there's so many pieces that are just,
it's like a service, right? Basically, you're putting on service. Yeah. And it's funny because at the time that it hadn't released, it was still early, before it was released.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was pre. We were still. I was put in charge of building the world, conceiving of the entire world. Sort of transcribing Middle Earth into digital form, kind of thing. And so we had this huge map, and I worked out the scale, and we did a bunch of stuff, and it was fun. But I was definitely coming from the mentality of creating a immersive, story-driven game for sure. And I think they liked that, but there was definitely weird conflicts with the team where I was speaking a different language than they were speaking a different language, and there was some weird conflicts.
It's
I was in Boston. I was far away from my family and my friends, and it just wasn't meant to be at the end of the day. I felt too isolated from everything and everybody. But it was an awesome experience. So I learned an incredible crap ton. But yeah, that's a whole interesting. It's an interesting topic in itself, actually. How I tried to bring single-player, story-driven things to that game. I the various ways I attempted to do that. But anyways, then I fast forward to came back to Vancouver, and I got an amazing gig at Radical Entertainment, where I worked with a fantastic team on a game called Incredible Hulk: Ultimate Destruction, which is my first console game. That was an incredibly awesome learning experience as well. I'm super proud of that.
Super fun game as well. Like that was really, I had great fun.
You played it, yeah?
Yeah.
Did you finish it? Did you get through the end, the whole story, all the story missions?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
It was a long time ago, so I'm trying to remember bits of it, but I just remember it. I actually really enjoyed both the story, but also like the flow of the gameplay, like the free form flow, like just the way you traveled, and it just was really cool.
Yeah. That was an amazing team. That was a really, really inspired team. It was one of my most inspired teams I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And I had a lot of fun too. I felt like it was one of the classic experiences where I was learning as much as I was applying. I was applying everything I knew. I was also learning lots at the same time. So it was awesome. Which is usually that's how most projects should be, really. But anyways, yeah, I did half the levels in that game. Half the missions I all of the story missions. That was pretty much my thing on that project. Yeah. And then I moved on to Scarface after that. I actually spent about 9 months on that, scripted the crap out of that game. And I'm proud of what I did to it. I did all the gang nests, all the sort of ambient gang nests that would come based on time of day in the story. They'd pop up and then go away. But I tell you, after that, and this was 2006 now, after that I was sick and tired of mindless death and destruction, like really sick of it. Especially after Scarface, where the whole thing was just like, you're killing people, getting money, selling drugs. Like it's just...
So it's interesting. So the one thing I would call out to sort of for folks to think about in a way is just that's 10 years ago, and like you think of, I don't know, you worked on a ton of stuff within that 10 years. Like was there any one thing that you missed the most in that first your sort of formative first 10 years? I guess it's around 10. I think probably 13, 14 years, but first sort of phase of your career there?
Yeah. Like where I was that's a really good question. Thing I missed the most. Honestly, the first thing that came to mind is something I hesitate to say, which is a steady paycheck.
Yeah, there's practical realities in gaming, and then there's passion.
Yep. Because that's the thing. That's the thing is that when you're getting paid to make games, there's bosses, and there's the whole hierarchy, and you got to make people happy, and you got to make all these people happy, and the gamers are somewhere down the line, right? They're in there somewhere.
And that's the challenge of I think you hit the nail on the head. The challenge of big games and big productions is there's sort of this, actually that's part of the other problem, is it's the assumed things you need to do to make the gamers happy, because no one really knows the answer all the time. There's sort of elements of them.
And it's about making an argument for that, right?
Yeah.
And everybody who could argument that, like, oh, I think the gamers like this. No, I think the gamers like this. Oh, I have data that says you were both wrong. The gamers like this. Oh, who's right? Right?
No, well, and you know, if you've ever done any of the focus group testing, you find that you know, like everyone's wrong usually. What they do, and you go like, what?
Yeah.
It's very funny when you watch someone play your game in a focus setting because you learn a lot from that. So,
no kidding.
What creative? Let's take away from the realities of life and go creatively. What did you miss at that first? What was the thing you missed the most that first part of your career?
I guess, maybe working with really large teams in general, and full of bustling with awesome talent. You know, these huge teams are funded really well, so there's these massive teams, and often I get to meet and work with a whole wide variety of people with a huge number of skills and specializations. Just striking up conversations with any of those people any day would I yield all kinds of stuff that I would learn. Like, that's how. Like, I remember one programmer on Hulk. His whole job was pretty much the camera. It was just his job to make sure that camera was the best solution ever, right? Because, you know, Hulk's moving around like crazy, and the camera needs to keep Hulk in view at the same time. It can't get caught in all the different buildings and geometry all around the game. So it's pretty complicated, and then all the stuff that was put into that camera is mind-boggling.
It's a pretty cool. I mean, I remember the cameras well, and it's hard because I mean, Hulk bounced around like a maniac, right? Like that was the other thing. It's like in that game, like all over the place.
Yeah, just bounce, running up walls, bouncing, jumping, building.
Very dynamic.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then the building, and then, you know, there's all kinds of cases where you could be in very tight alleyways, or there's buildings all over the place. So there's sort of random geometry in the city, and the camera just needed to always work, right? And it's amazing how at the end of the day, it did a beautiful job of sort of not going inside geometry and things like that. At the same time, keeping the Hulk in view and allowing the player to keep controlling what's going on to a certain extent, and also give the player control to actually move the camera around and say, okay, I want to throw this tank at that helicopter over there. I know there's one behind me, so I got to pick the tank and then spin around and throw it, and it just kind of worked, right? So yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest thing is that. As far as creatively, and it's interesting the way you pose the question. I'm trying to think if there's anything. There was an interesting challenge working with big IPs. Like I totally skipped over one of my biggest gigs. Actually, I worked at Amaze Entertainment, and I worked on Harry Potter Chamber of Secrets PC.
Oh, okay.
I was actually game director on that project. But 9 months from conception to shipping, we actually hit every single milestone. It was all done. This is the only time I worked indirectly for EA. It was, you know, so EA at the time, as you know, they like to have like the shotgun up releases. So whenever there's a big, at least back then especially, there was a big IP release, they'd hire a whole bunch of different companies to make all the different SKUs simultaneously, and then so they could release simultaneously all SKUs and have them all be on the shelf on the movie release. So this was for Chamber of Secrets, obviously, and our game had to be on the shelf at a particular day, so the schedule was in stone. And I remember when they made the first game based on the Sorcerer's Stone, it was a total, basically massive clusterfuck of a project, like really bad. Like they had no designated lead designer, and it was a big mess. They had all these people, and it was, everybody was crisscrossing, and ended up being the whole game ended up being bits and pieces, sort of a whole bunch of mini games all smashed together, and sort of like this, it barely held together. But they shipped it, and because of Harry Potter Chambers, because it was the very first Harry Potter video game, it sold like crazy. But it didn't have much critical success, so to speak. But anyways, moving forward in the Chamber of Secrets, like, hey, you got all this stuff, you've got Hogwarts built, you've got all these characters built. Okay, awesome. Let's now make an awesome game with all this stuff. And the cool thing is I was able to sell, this Guy Miller was the head of design direction for Harry Potter franchise at EA. He worked out of the office in London, and I recall he actually had the ear of the author of Harry Potter. I always forget her name. But he had her ear, so he was the one, which part was that?
J.K. Rowling.
Yes. So he had her ear, and he ended up, he was the one that hit the final call. So I remember having a meeting with him, and I remember trying to sell him on my vision at the time I had for Harry Potter. And I had this sort of idea forming of like a hub-based video game that was that actually unlocks sections as you progress, and you learn spells in classrooms, and then you'd be able to use those spells to actually help unlock sections in the level. And he's like, "Oh, that sounds really cool. Go forth and make your game." I'm like, "Oh, awesome." He's like, "Yeah, I'll just hands off. You go do it." Right? That was an amazing thing that he did that, because I felt empowered by EA to basically direct the team at Amaze to make the game, and it went really well. The team loved what we were doing, and everybody, there was no official crunch time. Everybody just worked really hard, and things came together beautifully, and we hit every milestone, like the original scheduled milestone, on schedule. And the the QA department, when we had the very first QA milestone, they said, "Hey, this is really good. Pass!" like off the bat.
That's such a delightfully rare thing to happen in the industry. It's hilarious. Like,
that's what they said at the time. They were all dumbfounded. I'm like, "Yeah, the team's awesome."
Yeah, that doesn't happen that often. So why don't let's jump forward a little bit to so where did the original, how did you get to the original consortium? Like what happened? How did that kind of come about?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I guess a big chunk of it does come from the creative void left from not shipping Amen, the Awakening at Cave Dog.
Yeah.
I had spent a lot of time coming up with a core story concept and a lot of the overall arcing sci-fi concept behind that entire story. At the time, being as young as I was, there was a lot of sort of cheesy stuff in there, and in terms of the actual execution. But there's a lot of stuff I really, really liked, and especially on the game design side, a lot of stuff that I really, really liked and felt passionate about. Like the design, the inventory design, and the entire approach to inventory, really, in like Deus Ex when it launched, was pretty much what we had fully working, in the build in the late '90s. So I remember when that game came out. I to this day, I've never actually, to be truthful, never actually played an entire playthrough of Deus Ex, because every time I boot that game up, I start to feel a little bit, oh god, like it's hard to explain exactly. It's just there's so much that game we had working, and then the whole thing imploded. So it bothers me that game went down as being the woo, because we were on the same trail as them in many respects, right?
Yeah, that's always hard. You go through a couple of those where you're like, oh,
really?
Well,
really?
Yeah.
I'm super curious. What comes to mind? First thing that comes to mind for you that's a similar thing to?
Well, ours is slightly different, and I can't say we complain that much about it. But if it wasn't for the original Diablo, we would have been like Baldur's Gate would have been the first true return to RPG. Because Diablo came out about a year before Baldur's Gate 1.
Yeah.
And so, and believe me, I played the hell out of Diablo. In fact, Bioware shut down for a couple of weeks, but there were also and our games were totally different. But like the idea of like we thought we had the great return to the RPG locked up. It didn't hurt us at all either way. I mean, they were both very successful games, but it was more like, don't. but I think then you kind of go back to the maybe there's a bit of a great minds think alike thing, and then you pump yourself up. Go, hey, I was thinking the right thing. But it's that'd be the biggest thing, I think. And there's also little elements of other games. I mean, it's more like micro stuff, but just that was one of the things that I kind of recall.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. So Consortium, the original one. I mean, how did it get off the ground? How did you make it?
Yeah. So I mean, I'd been toiling around with a lot of the stuff that I wanted to make a game with ultimately from the Amen days, right? There's some design stuff, inventory stuff, some general, very basic story stuff. So I've been toiling with that for years. I knew I wanted to bring that stuff to life in some way, shape, or form eventually. So I was gestating all through from 2000 all the way to 2006, all through all those other gigs I was doing. It was just gestating in the background. So at the end, the time came at the end of Red Article. I was okay, especially after Scarface. I'm like, I'm done. I'm no interest in working on Scarface 2. No interest in working on really much of anything the studio was doing at that time. So now was the perfect time. I had been saving really, really carefully. So I saved a bunch of money, so I was able to leave and start going on my own and start thinking about what I wanted to do. So I actually incorporated interdimensional games in September 2006. I had the initial website up and things like that. And really, it was just me by myself thinking about engines, looking at the landscape, thinking about distribution. At the time, Steam was just on the early days of its rise. I was like, yeah, I'd love to go that. I had a buddy at Valve, and he was like, you should use Source Engine. And it turns out Source Engine was kind of the best choice even early on, because in my head, I knew I wanted to make a game that was the polar opposite of a game like Scarface, right? I really, really wanted to make a game that, while it had action and violence, that ultimately the experience of playing the game would have a positive impact on you and on anybody that played it. It'd be a game that you could put in front of, say, a 10-year-old kid or something, and that you'd be proud that if they play it and they get it, that they'll learn something a little bit about where the consequences of violence and where violence, the place it has, and the overall usefulness of it which is, in most cases not very much, right? Usually if things come to violence, things are just degraded horribly, right? It's like,
exactly.
You talk to any police officer, and if they have to pull their gun out and start shooting, the shit's gone really bad. Shit's gone horrible, right? That's like the last thing they want to do. And so I wanted people to think about that, to reflect upon that stuff. So that was sort of my high level goal. So the goal was like, make and at the same time though, from a pure mechanical, professional point of view, I was deeply interested in exploring how to push the boundaries of player freedom and agency and choice making that most regular video games have huge amounts of. Do I go here? Do I go up this platform? Do I go down here? Do I make this choice to open this door or that door? Do I do this? To totally have that be blended seamlessly with character-driven linear narrative, and have those be completely blended together in a seamless way. Because I felt that many games were heading that direction. Your games specifically were the closest that I could think of that were playing with that whole concept in ways of how make the stories and things that happen closer to the player, as opposed to this thing that a screenwriter writes separated, and that you just experience whatever the screenwriter wants you to experience.
Touch on that for a second. It's interesting. I mean, like you said, like that. That's something that sort of defines some games. But why is it, do you think, that most people think of the story stuff like after, or as a separate from the game? What is it about that, you think?
Yeah, I think it's because there's a divide by zero that happens in many people's brains, especially the professional creatives that have been writing novels and screenplays for their whole career. I think especially that, and I think that, and the thinking that many game producers have and game people have, that they're only no games, that they think that, we've got all this budget money, let's go get a really famous writer and novelist or whatever to come on board and write the story for this game. Yeah, it'll be awesome. We'll totally. And I think that's just erroneous thinking. Like that those people are going to be frustrated because they're not going to be able to write the way they are able to write. I think it comes down to like it's an easy way to look at it, right? Like, people know how to make movies. Movies have been well established for a long time. Cinematic techniques are well ingrained and taught all over the place. Anybody can learn them, and novel writing techniques the same thing, right? And I think that people haven't. I guess the thing is that not many people have gone too down to deep think really hard about how the interactive side of playing a video game should and could affect the way the narrative unfolds. And instead, they think of more of like that the story is going to be crafted and then ingrained in the experience. And if you do that, if you take the traditional cinematic approach of writing almost like a series of scenes that all make up a big, very interesting movie with lots of twists and turns and characters backstabbing each other and whatever the stuff that happens in that film or movie, and their script writes all this stuff, and then they go and they put all this stuff into production and they make a whole series of big cutscenes. Then they got to figure out, well, how do those cutscenes blend into what the player's doing at the game? And there's such a gigantic divide there in terms of where the player could be, that they're almost never going to mesh. Never.
It's like you have two experiences. You have, okay, there's gameplay, and then there's like sit back and watch. And I mean, it's funny because I think like the games that really strike me the most like that were some of the older school Japanese RPGs where you'd watch like a lot of cutscenes, then you run around. And
the Final Fantasy ones, right?
This is other, I think, Xenosaga and a couple. It's just all these old school games that like you'd have big lavish cutscenes, and then you twiddle your thumbs and kind of wait to do stuff. But the two never really, the connection didn't feel strong.
Exactly.
So then so you got your company started up, you got your vision of what you want to do. How did you make the first game? Like, how did that even come about?
Okay, so when I started to realize that the source engine was the right solution, I knew I wanted to have a lot of characters you could talk to in person, first person, right? I had this one idea that was really ingrained in my head, is I wanted to be able to walk up to NPCs and have seamless back and forth chatting conversations, and then be able to seamlessly walk away from them, like have there be no conversation mode, simply just be walk up and chat and walk away. And at the time, the games that had the kind of solution that I wanted, just to be modified a bit, were the Half-Life games. So Half-Life 2 specifically, all that beautiful in-person, first-person choreography stuff they had in that game, the tool behind that is genius. And to this day is the only tool that can quite do exactly that, to cross all engines. Luckily, there's some stuff being implemented in the Unreal 4 engine that will help us with that, but that's a whole separate topic. But anyway, so having played that game and as this mute Gordon Freeman walking around looking up to people, it's like, yeah, what if you could play? What if you could like do that, but rather than just staring at someone and watch them with those beautiful choreography, what if you could respond and actually chat with this person, right? So that's literally what I did. I took. I started a mod, a Half-Life 2 mod, and I used constructive shell geometry, and I built the first version of Zenlo, which is the setting of the first Consortium game, so this big triple-decker aircraft. I built the whole thing with brushwork, CSG, the entire thing, to sort of proof out the idea that I had that you could have a game or at least a big chunk of a game that takes place aboard this aircraft. And and then I grabbed Half-Life 2 characters and briefly reskinned them and called them the Knight and the Bishop, and so I'd come up with all of some of the backstory and the concept of the Consortium itself at this point as well. So I was able to roughly get characters in there, and I wrote the very first interactive screenplay of the game myself that was really, really bare bones. It just had the sort of structure of the idea of how I imagined the interactive conversations working, and so I had all that stuff. And then I sort of approached my brother and started getting him interested in the IP. He'd been writing for years, and just for fun, and I kind of thought there was a spark of real talent there and passion. So sort of started getting him involved in like 2008, 2009, and started diving deep into world building and sort of actually coming up with the final characters for the game and things like that. But I had this functioning prototype. We'd walk around, and I didn't have the competition system working, but I did have it so you could walk up and you'd see. I would just trigger these images that come up on the HUD that would basically sync up with as if you're actually playing and pressing buttons and talking. So you saw the whole thing mocked out, right? So you could imagine it being playable pretty easily. And that really helped sell people, get people interested in the idea and the concept, and sort of start to pull a team together. So that all, fast forward a little bit, started looking for actual funding to be able to make it. And I started feeling more confident that I could actually hire some people and get a production going. I'd be able to make this. So I applied to something called the Canada Media Fund was announced. I'm sure you're aware of the Canada Media Fund. Yeah. And so I applied to the very first round of that in 2010. By that point, we had a mountain of stuff. We had launched alternate reality games. That's something we did in 2009. Was we brought on a very, very talented Flash artist to help us out with our web presence. And the idea we had was, let's do some backstory for the game. But that morphed into the interactive alternate reality game. That's one of the bigger ones out there, and it's still going to this day. There's a mammoth amount of Flash-driven content and audio files that are all scrambled. You got to descramble, and wacky Flash puzzles you can dig through, and entire Flash 2D games you can play that unlock content. It's just a mammoth amount of stuff. So we've done a lot of work sort of building the groundwork for the world and the characters. And that the Consortium King is an AI that was actually created by linking together 21 human beings. Basically, 21 human beings were linked together in a massive, like a network of humans, if you will. Their families all got given tons of money to do this, and they were subscribing to this. So that artificial neural net was created out of these 21 human brains all connected. And each person was flawed in some way. The idea too is to have this AI be built from the ground up to be inherently human and inherently have an understanding of the frailty of humanity and be inherently unable to hurt humans and that kind of stuff. So it's a truly benevolent AI. So the ARG dives deep into how the AI was built and the facility where it was built and all the people involved in making it, all the politics surrounding it and all this stuff, and other elements that were attacking it and saying, this is wrong, you shouldn't make this, and sort of all that kind of stuff. So we had all that stuff under our belt, and I included all that in a massive package we sent to the CMF. I remember I had a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation that was self-running. You simply double-click and it would ring, had embedded into it. And it was just me going on and on and on about the game. And then we made these books. We put together these books of the backstory and the world Bible and the story Bible and the character Bible and all this stuff. This massive, gigantic stack, like literally, like a gigantic stack of documents. That
you're like, we got stuff.
We got stuff. Here's
proof. We got stuff.
To this day, I have no idea where those books ended up. They're sitting on someone's shelf somewhere, or they've shredded them. I don't know. But we sent them with some pretty cool stuff.
They're like propping up someone's monitor. They're like someone's monitor sitting on there, so it's the right.
Yep.
That'd be funny.
Yeah, no doubt, actually. So yeah, they came back and said, "Wow, you're funded." We asked for 500,000 Canadian. And they came back and said, yes, you're funded. But the link there being that according to the whole thing, is that was just only going to be a chunk of the funding. We'd have to cop up 200K of our own somehow, right?
Okay, got it.
So at that point, we started. This is early 2010. We started the circuit of trying to find investors to come in and invest in us to unlock this 500K, right? And it ended up being a nightmare because, damn it, as much as I was in the industry and had made a lot of games, I really didn't know anybody that was investing in games. I had no idea. I had no connections to anybody that I knew that actively invested in the creation of in video game ventures, right? So I started with the angel circuit here in Vancouver. I remember I got a really nice suit and I went and ended up pitching to this angel group, this large angel group. I had to go through a screening board first and pitch to them, and they said, "Yeah, we'd love to have you pitch to us." And it was exactly a 10-minute PowerPoint presentation that was refined to perfection. And I did it within exactly 10 minutes and all this stuff. And the feedback generally was, "Well, this looks cool, but I don't know anything about the game industry. I don't invest in industry. I don't know." Like that's the gist of what.
Yeah, and that's one of the real huge challenges on funding of independent games. Like there isn't really not really a history of it, nor a sort of a group of people that do it commonly. Therefore, it's actually really hard to do, as you found. So.
Yep. It's insanely hard, especially, I would say it's even worse, obviously, nowadays, right? The sheer number of people asking. And the sheer number of people that actually could potentially deliver, too, is getting more and more and more, right? As engines are getting more powerful, people are learning them more and more. It's quite the landscape these days. But anyways, where was I? Yes.
So what happened? So you're looking for your money. You got the CMF said, "Hey, we got money for you if you can match it or find some part of it." So how did that? Obviously, you made it. So what happened?
Well, yeah, what happened was throughout the 2010s, of pitching, going to doing a GDC and pitching publishers, and pitching publishers was interesting because a lot of them said, "Well, this sounds really cool, but this also sounds too risky and crazy. We don't believe you can pull it off." Or to read between the lines from the feedback we got, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, come down to the wire, and it's almost a year after we had been told we got the money, and I basically called the team and said, "Look, I haven't been able to raise this money. Like, I just can't. I've tried, but for every reason, no one's willing to bite." And they said, "Well, look, we want you to have the money anyways." I'm a little bit. I now realize I should have said that. This is going to be on the record or recorded somewhere. But
it'll be fine.
Sorry?
It'll be fine.
Okay. Yeah. So just as they so you've got the money. You do. It's just that it's more like it's a bureaucracy, right? A really big bureaucracy. So they're thinking as well. You said you needed this extra amount of money. As long as you sign something saying that you will take care of that amount at some point during the production, then yeah, you can have this money. And also sign something that says you, producer, will only take, I think at the time it was 20K total out of this budget for your expenses, personal expenses. That we'll unlock this money. So I said, okay, cool. And at that point, I was to be pretty honest with you, very on the verge of bankruptcy personally. It comes just going on for so long and pushing. And finally, I had so it was right down to the wire. So I basically took the 20K immediately, right as soon as the money came out, I took the entire 20K. And at that point, I was unable to take officially any money from that pool anymore. And so thus began a very interesting. Otherwise, basically at the time, also right around the exact same moment, literally, around the money coming into actually quite literally, but a week before the money came into the actual bank account, my wife and I had our first kid. Our daughter was born right then. That was really intense, as you might imagine. She's 5 now, but the whole first year was really hell because we had the big chunk of the 500K was in the bank account. It was done in 3 tranches, and we started production, and I already lined up and ready to go, so we dived into and started production that year. But it was a tough year. It was definitely really tough. I learned a lot of stuff. It was the first time I'd ever been in charge of cash flow and actually effectively paying to enable a project, paying people to do stuff. So it was a massive learning project for me. Also, the first time being a dad, and it was really intense.
Oh, that doesn't take time. There's no, no, I'm just joking.
It's no big deal.
No.
At the time, I felt like I was handling it. The hindsight being everything as it is. Looking back, and it's like, oh yeah, I made some mistakes. I made some mistakes. Even I won't get specifics, but I definitely made some mistakes in hiring the wrong people too. People that I thought I could count on, that unfortunately things didn't pan out as well.
You can learn, right?
Learn, yeah, big time.
So the game's running. developing it. How was that development experience? Your first one in charge of everything. What do you feel like worked out? I mean, at the end of the day, if you get a game done, that's a huge accomplishment. Like that's for everyone out there that hasn't made games. If you actually finish, that's like a big deal. so beyond that part, what do you think you felt like you really nailed, or what went really well on for you?
Yeah. So what went really, really well was an inspired team. As much as not everybody that started ended, the people that did end were 100% totally committed and believed in the vision of the game. And there was a point halfway through production where it was running itself. I literally wasn't telling people what to do at all. I wasn't even having to point direction. They were just taking on tasks. I'm like, yep, that's a task you need to take on. I was just basically going, yep, correct, everybody. They're all just doing exactly what needs to be done. We're on the road to ship this game. Awesome, So at some point, it took on a life of its own, and we were heading toward. We all knew what the end goal was, and it was awesome. But getting there was really, really tough. No doubt about it. We definitely ran into some cash flow problems. The first problem resulted from the fact that this was back when Valve didn't have green. There was no green light. So to get a game onto Steam, you had to basically send a build to some people at Valve, and then they'd review it and go yes or no, right? And they wouldn't give you any reasons if it was yes or no. And I remember that was frustrating for a lot of people. Yeah. So we literally did that. We sent a build around, and looking back at it, it was kind of silly, but we were pretty proud because we did accomplish a lot in that first 8 or 9 months. We had invented the system, fully functioning now. So the interactive dialogue system that's in the consortium was fully functioning, pretty much done at that point. And we had a bunch of content to show off how it works, and we had the set was coming along of Zenlo, and although the concept was very, very clearly there, it just wasn't polished, right? But for whatever reason, Valve saw that, and so we can't. I think they're thinking, from what I understood, anyways, from when I talked to other people, was that if they could ship, when they review a build, it's like they decide, could we ship this right now, right? Would we ship this right now on this platform? And the answer was no. They simply say no to the developer, and that would be it. So they came back and said no, and unfortunately, I was required to get a yes in order to unlock the next tranche of money from the CMF.
Oh, so it's almost like, it's interesting. So in other words, it's what it really is a semantics of the definition on the CMF funding. Really, it's like it's like alpha or beta approved, then you get more.
Yeah, it wasn't quite like a publisher deal, like what you just said, but it's a little bit more like I just needed to have confirmation that yes, Steam is our distributor. Like they wanted confirmation that the game's actually going to be sold on the market on Steam, which I wasn't able to provide when I expected to be able to provide it. So that left us a bit of a bind. So at that point, the people that were truly inspired of the project dug their feet in, and a couple of us took very little pay at that point in order to lessen the cash flow considerably so that we could continue cranking and solve some of the bigger problems. The biggest problem that hadn't been solved at that point in production was actually the art direction. It was haphazard and crappy up at that point. It was really just a mess. There wasn't any guiding vision for it at all. And Jason Zayas, who was ended up becoming our art director, came in and had this really, I think, in my opinion, absolutely brilliant concept for how to harness and get an actual art style going with the small number of people we had. And he defined that at early 2012, and that sort of that was a bit of a watershed moment for sure in terms of, okay, yeah, this is cool. This is a distinctive art style here. Let's move forward with this. We can ship the game with this. So we basically at that point we were struggling for ways to continue. So one of the things that did come through and help us was we applied for SRED, a shred claim, that early 2012, and we were approved. We got about $80,000 a little later that year.
Clarify for people what a shred claim is.
Scientific research and experimental development tax credit.
Yeah, so when you create things that are technically new, you can actually apply for some proportion of that money back, which you did, which is great. So that's like a source of funding as well.
Yep, totally. Yeah, we came up with, I think, 4 or 5 different individual projects that we said, we luckily, because we kept daily Scrum reports, I was able to have an analyst go through every single daily report and work out which of these contributed to which of the shred projects, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a fairly hefty application because we were working on brand new stuff.
And folks' knowledge, it's not like put a piece of paper and you get a document. No, you get a check. It's a lot of documentation and proof, and then it's actually typically reviewed by someone in the field to verify that that's actually new stuff. So in your case, when you're creating a new dialogue system and that sort of stuff, that's absolutely valid work. A lot of game work, like just making textures or whatever isn't Powerwork. It has to be like creating new things.
Yeah, it's almost like what I was told is kind of like that. It's got to be something that's risky, something that might not ever even come to. Yeah. And so that was obviously a godsend for us. So we were able to keep going. But then, near the end of 2012, I knew there was going to be cash. At this point, I was starting to get wise in a bit more, right? I'm like, okay, I'm not going to let this happen again. I've got to think ahead and think of all the worst case scenarios.
Now you're in charge, so you got to do that kind of thinking. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got to think, okay, crap, what could go wrong, and fix that ahead of time. So I'm thinking, okay, well, we need more. We could use more funding, obviously, right? To be able to have more runway, to be able to have us some more time polishing the game, getting it done. So my thinking was Kickstarter at that point. Of course, right around that time, Double Fine had its big breakout Kickstarter campaign, and that sort of got everybody thinking about Kickstarter being now an option for game funding. So we started putting together a Kickstarter campaign mid to late 2012, and made this video that was really cool. We hired this person, the same person that did Planetary Annihilation video, that filming stuff. She was really, really talented filmmaker. She came up from Seattle with us and put together this very, very polished video. And we put up a campaign, and it failed miserably. It was December 1st, actually. We put the campaign up, and it was a horrible failure. And we had to figure out, why was this? What caused this? And looking back at it, there's many different factors. When we launched, December being a terrible time to launch. Second thing, we had never announced our IP at all. We had totally been keeping entirely quiet about what we were doing. I think that's because that's a bleed over from my experience in the AAA industry, right? Where I was used to every single project I was on, it was a secrecy, don't tell anybody, marketing campaign is going to take care of that, blah, 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 blah. Whereas I knew that I didn't quite fully realize that the rules are completely different from where I was sitting.
Well, and I think that sort of whole AAA marketing philosophy, like we never followed that at Bioware. We did the opposite. And
really?
Yeah, well, no, because we were all about promoting what we're doing, even like years before it was done. Like, once it was actually going to happen, like, you can kind of tell when something's going to get made. So, like, I think that, like, and I think that's where the old school marketing of marketing, the advertising will do it is like certainly no longer true. Nowadays it's the word of mouth, it's the sort of community you build around a product. But yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I mean, in some ways, I think that's kind of the positive thing that happened with the new one, is you're able to carry through. But let's continue the story of, and then we we got only 15 minutes left, so let's zoom
quickly. Okay, so I'll do a quick version to get up to it. Yeah. So to quickly finish that story, really quick. Essentially, yeah. So we failed, but then we spent a couple months. We figured out what we did wrong. We learned a whole bunch of stuff. We remade the pitch. We relaunched the Kickstarter in 2013. We were successful this time, and now we had enough cash to go through it. We also put the game on Greenlight at that time, which had just launched. Then it sat there for quite a while. Supposedly, our Greenlight pitch was pretty bad. People didn't understand what that was until the end. But then that's one thing. We had a hard time self-marketing, really hard time. We had a hard time knowing what the hell our game was ourselves. We knew what we were making. We had a hard time describing it to the world. And it really wasn't until the whole game was done that I had a full understanding of that. We could make videos to properly convey it and whatnot. But that all aside, we eventually build up to did the final round of VO, got all of the game, cranking through all the last choreography stuff, fixing all the bugs, getting all the systems all tightened up, and eventually we shipped the game in January 2014. And there were some bugs to begin with, but we fixed them really, real fast. Over the few months after that, we ended up with a completely finished game. We called the Master Edition in April of 2014. And at that point, we've just been supporting it with patches, but it's steadily been gathering fans. And right off the bat, some of the things people said about it are amazing. So and people still discover it to this day. People still make posts. Oh my God, I had no idea this game existed. Oh my God, it's so amazing. It always puts a smile on our face, because it was a hard game to make. But having shipped it, it's like it was amazing, fun thing to do.
Let's talk about that's all. I mean, like I said, shipping your own thing is incredibly rewarding. And then when people talk about it and people play it, it's like it doesn't get better. You know what I mean?
There's nothing quite like it. It really isn't.
So Ray and I would go look at our games on the shelves and kind of like to sort of sit there and look at them.
I made this. We made this.
So on the sequel, I mean, I thought, rather than focusing on like, hey, it's funded now, they went through FIG, like let's focus on what you're doing different. Like you're now, you're changed platforms. Like what have you learned from the first one that you're applying to the second? And now you're sequel, which is a great position to be in.
Yeah, so much, a mountain of information. I mean, we now know the formula that we invented. Like we were inventing the formula and making the game with it at the same time, which is a confusing, difficult thing to do. because it just is. You have to sort of work out bit by bit what's actually possible. Steve would write a whole bunch of stuff for the screenplay, and we'd have countless hours and hours and hours over Skype, working together with screen sharing. I'd be like in Hammer in the editor, and he'd be at a screenplay, and he'd be dictating stuff, and I'd be like, we can't do that. Let's change the story right now because you can't do that. Or I'd be like, hey, no, you can do this really easily. The story can do this. He's like, oh, that's amazing. I'll do that more often. So Steve and I going back and forth, understanding what was actually possible, and now we can look back at all that. We know exactly how because we have the solution, the finished solution in the form of the first game. We're now able to make calls in production of the second one, relying upon all that stuff we now know. So it's just a mountain of stuff. It's everything. It's how our characters work, how our world puts together, how the world looks, how the entire game plays, what all the mechanics are, how all the combat mechanics work, how the core of the interactive storytelling system, how it works. I mean, it's just a mountain of stuff. So we're able to confidently sit back and now push boundaries even further with like building, going much, much deeper, going way, way beyond what we did in the first game, in a bunch of ways that I think the biggest difference, obviously, it really is the setting, right? So the first game, you're in this effectively cramped aircraft the whole game, and with the tower, you're in this massive 1.5 kilometer monstrosity skyscraper sitting on top of the River Thames, and that setting is a fundamental difference. But yet there's a couple features that got axed from the first game that we're now able to effectively just put on, because we're basically porting everything over from the first game, right? Yeah. All the C++ code, all the Flash stuff goes right into scale form in Unreal 4. All the systems, everything was written in C++. So all that stuff most of it translates over quite beautifully. So we're able to literally harness everything that was done in the first game. So in many ways, I'm looking at this project as almost like an elaborate DLC for the first game, right? That happens to use a new engine.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, sequels, I mean, it reminds me a lot of our Baldur's Gate 2 versus Baldur's Gate 1, right? Like, I mean, when you have, like, the way I think about games in some ways is there are thousands of decisions you have to make. And when you're making the first incarnation of a group of games, like a trilogy or whatever you want to call it, you got more decisions to make than you'll ever make again. And in the future ones, you know a lot of the answers, so you have less decisions to make, and that just speeds things along because decisions and figuring take time. Yeah. So yeah, and I think you're in the perfect position because it's almost like you can take the thing. I always joke, it's to take things you didn't quite get right the first time and fix them, and even if you do just those, it's like
exactly. Exactly, so much precise. That's why it's so much fun working this project, because we literally have scoured the internet and we found every single bit of critical feedback from the first game, and we're addressing every single one of those things in spades, right? Yeah. And then some. So it's like, oh god, yeah. Like the thing is that all these systems we built for the first game, a lot of them were useless because you're stuck in this damn plane, right? I mean, to be honest, we wanted to be able to do more than playing for the first game. We had to rejig the story and make it work for scope reasons. We just had no choice. But we built a lot of systems that were designed from the beginning to allow the player to go and roam and have big adventures in big open spaces, right? Those systems are all working in Consortium. They're all there, and you can go into the virtual trainer and start making bounce, jump around, and run around, and have these big epic fights and whatnot with all these different bots that spawn. But it's just a virtual trainer. It's just it's not the core game. The core game itself has combat when the story calls for it, right? That's really the core to what makes a Consortium game Consortium, is that it's not about a video game where you're going to go and shoot bad guys and you have like boss fights, things like that. It's about diving into an interactive story, and you have but the one that you fully embrace the idea of being a Consortium bishop that is this peacekeeper that has all these tools at his or her disposal. That includes weaponry, includes lethal and non-lethal gear, but also includes your words. And it's up to you to decide how you use that tool set to forge through the story, to dive through the story. So the Consortium 1 is a perfect expression of that, but unfortunately has a side effect of being, well, on an airplane, there's only so many ways you can have fights, right? Yeah. There just is, right? It's like, so that really limited our ability to fully showcase to the world all the stuff we'd built. And so that's one of the things I'm really pumped about this one, is that all this shit we've already got done that people didn't even realize we already got done is now going to be fully harnessed in the tower.
I got to tell you, Greg, you don't sound very excited.
Yeah, I've had a bit of a depressing day. I'm all kind of slow.
No. You sound very excited, which is awesome. How many people on the team right now? Like, how many people working on the game?
Yeah, so the core team: myself, my brother, Ryan, Dale, and Ian. So 5 full timers right now. plus 2 other people on a very, very small side project that is super secret that I haven't told anybody about. That's sort of like, it's going to be a surprise for the fans.
Super.
Little side project that directly ties into the tower. It's all about build up backstory for the tower stuff, but specifically what it is, you're keeping a massive lid on it just so we can make it a surprise. I'm actually, to be honest with you, Greg, I'm sick and tired of announcing stuff and talking about stuff, before it's done. I want to have the experience of just hey, this thing's done. We put it out there and just boom, right? Have something new. That's. So it's a tiny little side project that directly ties into the tower. But yeah, five absolute full timers.
Cool.
Actually, there's actually a 6th contractor. Sorry, we just brought on a 6th contractor, and there'll be more contractors coming on later too. There's like sort of part-time people with very specific jobs. Like we have one guy right now whose whole job is just the exterior of the tower. He modeled the tower that you saw in all the pre-production stuff, and we're refining that further and further and further. That's obviously that's sort of the main character in the game, if you will, right? Is the tower itself. So.
Do you do anything special with music or audio? Do you have how do you approach that?
Oh yeah, we work with a studio in Vancouver called Studio X. These are the guys that they did the music and sound effects for all the Homeworld games and the most recent game. And really, really awesome guys, like really fantastic. They have a totally modern studio with an awesome setup for VO. We a lot of our voice actors came from voice acting school here in Vancouver. We had a big series of casting sessions, for the consortium, and found all these amazing people, and they all love their characters and they love Steve's writing, and they all can't wait to get back. We just got Night 15. Michelle, who plays Night 15, just emailed the other day saying, when are we going to get back in the studio? I miss it. I'm like, soon. So. Yeah, so they basically have full service. They did a gigantic chunk of all the sounds for the first game and all of the VO recording and post-processing and that kind of stuff and mastering for all 1,000 lines of dialogue.
Cool. What stage are you at right now? I'm not looking for super specifics on deadlines or dates or anything, but just where in the sort of arc of production are you? Where are you at?
We're definitely early production, heading towards mid-production. So we're at the stage where we have we're at the cusp of having a big chunk of all of the Consortium 1 mechanics working in Unreal. We have a bunch of pretty much all of the new stuff, all the new things that they updated freefall suit, so how you fly around in this jetpack suit, and a whole bunch of updated mechanics, specifically like ledge grabbing, a fully dynamic ledge grabbing system, so you can explore the world in first person and be easily grabbing a whole ledges and sort of allow you to easily navigate the vents and everything else. And we're deep into getting close to the point of having the entire meta level design structure completed. We have the narrative charts done. It's actually, I'm picking it up at the print shop today. So the entire narrative chart of the game is completed. We know exactly what the game is we're going to make, and we've been scoping the hell out of it the whole time. So in creating that, I scoped the living shit out of it with Steve. So when we were conceiving of the final story for the game, I was constantly scoping and saying, no, not this, and giving it limitations of how many types of guys you can have, and this, and just scope. But we're extremely happy with the narrative web as it is. It's very, very doable. It makes use of a lot of the same content over and over again. So I would say there's a bunch of different ways that the project can go. But we're like kicking ass. I've never been in a project that's had this much stuff being done this quickly.
I think it's wonderful to be in the sequel land. And I think one of the things along the funding we kind of helped you move over to Fig, and I'm glad that worked out. But the fact that it's sequel and it's doable, it's a real testimony to sort of the platform in that it's the right place for stuff that's kind of curated and kind of provable, in the sense that if there's a lot of stuff out there. I think while there's a lot of stuff on Kickstarter will get done, there's a lot of stuff that won't, unfortunately, right?
It's one thing to it's one thing to skillfully convey a dream or an idea in a pitch and to get people excited about it. It's another thing entirely to actually consider trying to make it, right?
Well, and finish it so it's good. These are all different skill sets.
That's true. You're right. I guess you're right. Technically, they could make it, but it'd be a big pile of crap, right? Not yet.
They may not even still. You're dead on. I agree. It's the pitch man is not necessarily the person you want to rely on to deliver the final product.
Actually, make the damn thing, produce it. Yeah, totally. No, it's to me, it's like as a night and day difference. Having done the Kickstarter campaign and not raising enough from the budget we set, and then going to Fig, I could totally tell how the fans that know what we're doing and really want to see it. We can do it the second time around. Actually, literally make it happen. A lot of them, a handful of people putting in 2 or 3 or 4 grand or whatever quickly adds up to an actual budget, right?
Yeah. So what happens on the PR and marketing side? Do the big guys help out with that, or is that something you do still yourselves, or they help out?
I mean, obviously, right now we're just focusing entirely on making the game. We've done very little, other than things like this. Occasionally, we've done very little on the marketing side. But yeah, they're effectively kind of like a co-publisher. That's I think we're still working on how the relationship's going to pan out, but it does indeed seem like they're essentially going to do they're going to do definitely a fair amount of marketing and whatnot to ensure that their games are successful. I think they're going to have a little bit of a publisher-ish role in that respect to make sure that their games are promoted and whatnot. I think if you're a Fig game, you're kind of under the Fig, the wing, so to speak, and they'll do what they can to promote and
yeah, cool. So what's the first thing you're gonna do when the game is finally delivered?
When the game is finished and launched on Steam, you mean?
Like when it's launched, it's out the door, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna what?
Bloody good question. I think I'm going to take my family to Hawaii.
Ah, awesome.
For like a week at least, if not 2. Yeah, it's long overdue. And yeah,
check in, reset the family connections. Always important.
Yes, and I owe them that. I owe that to them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So I definitely will have owed that to them by that point. Most definitely, without question.
And well, what's the other thing would be like what's your sort of goal? Like, I mean, what do you see as success with this game? Like, what the tower consortium, the tower? What is a successful overall outcome for you guys?
In terms of sales, you mean?
Not just like philosophically. In some ways, I kind of like, I like to decouple the sales thing because I mean, obviously, hey, if we hit a great number, it's awesome. But beyond that, what is it? What do you want to get out of this? Like this whole thing, personally, or what philosophically?
Yeah, it's a freaking awesome question. I would say, honestly, to be blunt, I'd be 100% totally and utterly feel 100% of success, even regardless of sales whatsoever. If there's some people that say the equivalent of other companies need to use this formula, we want more games like this.
Yeah.
Make more games like that. Like that's my dream. Is that AAA companies and EA and Ubisoft and whatnot maybe change their formulas up in favor of something like what we're doing. Because it'll empower gamers. It'll usher a whole new wave of single-player games that have awesome stories, but also are so intimate for individual in terms of from a player's perspective of how that story relates to them and their personality and their
very personal. Very, very, very personal.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
want to play story games that I feel like I can afterwards go, that was my story, right? That's what I want. I want to play more games like that. I'm sick of playing games where it's just like some screenwriter story. Like, I'm not interested now. I'll watch a movie if you want to do that,
No, it's interesting. I think that obviously was one of our goals too, was to do that within a BioWare game. But I think, and that was actually one of the things that really excited me about your project was the fact that it sort of takes what we were doing, but adds in a more of a gameplay depth. Like, I think it's fair to say that while we had a lot of great story immersion and variability, gameplay between each playthrough was pretty much the same. Like, we didn't. I mean, there's some variation. You could approach combat different, but you couldn't avoid it generally.
Right.
Whereas what you're doing is really exciting because, again, like back into that kind of like there's a set of games that's like the Irrational, Looking Glass, if I remember correctly. Some of the
yes.
That sort of philosophy, and those have largely gone away, like sadly.
Yeah, I know. This is I love Dishonored, and Dishonored 2 is
I was going to say that. I was going to say, with the exception of.
Yeah.
But literally with the exception of that, and then that's and maybe more Deus Ex stuff we'll see, but Dishonored, Deus Ex, those are it's a different. There should be more of these.
Should be a lot more.
Yeah, yes. And then the other way to think about this too is like I would think like a VR future for what you do is really interesting because of the way you approach gameplay. I think it's more the way you do things is more flexible and provides more variety than some of the other like a standard type of combat gameplay. I mean, you have a lot of the combat, but you have other things that could could make a bigger part in a VR type environment.
Well, the whole talk anytime, anywhere thing, right? You just pull down your talking thing and start talking out loud and engage in conversation with would-be combatants instead of shooting them. The VR. We thought a lot about VR. I thought a lot long and hard about VR, and there's some really cool stuff we'd like
later.
to do.
Think about that later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Who knows what's going on? It could be anything.
Yep. Yeah.
And then just so you guys, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up, just to be clear, just so you understand. We've hit the deadline. I mean, I have a few minutes more, but I got to run off pretty quick. Do you have any more time? Or are you hard deadline? Where are we at, Jesse?
I've definitely got a fair amount of stuff to do today, but I could do a couple more minutes. Yeah.
So do you want to? Shall we maybe take a couple questions?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. Yeah. Where are we here? Actually, where's the Power Up Main Stage?
You have to click on Main Stage.
Power Up Main Stage.
Have Power Up Main Stage hashtag in front. We do have a 3-hour gap, but we have to run off. Cyril Leaf says VR has some true potential. Yeah, I heard that. I read that on the internet. We have a couple questions.
Is there any questions up here we missed?
Not yet, I don't think.
Okay, everybody who's listening, now's the time to ask questions.
Yeah. Questions. You guys use your typing magics. Why are you so awesome? Greg, why are you so awesome? Why are all Gregs awesome?
Greg, why are you so awesome?
I think it's because we're both named Greg. So, it's really the hardest thing to decide, but decide in regard to what? Needs a little more information.
About regarding what? Yeah. But yeah, philosophically speaking, it's like I literally just there is a selfish part of me that just wants to play more games like the one we're making. You know what I mean?
That's a great motive. I mean, that was.
It's like you said, that's what you guys. It's the same with you. It drove you guys, right?
We made Baldur's Gate because that's what we wanted to play. Yeah, what do you have for breakfast? I had black coffee. I had 3 espressos for breakfast.
I had an awesome. Actually, I still haven't finished it yet, but an awesome smoothie my wife made and black coffee. Yes.
Cyril Leaf, we're waiting, dude. Or we have big hopes. Big hopes for the rest of the things we need to decide on. Has anyone really been far even as decided to use even go want to do more look like? What we'll do after developing this already in the tower, technically? So, Ski, I'm not sure I understand the questions. I think, what's the best pen and paper RPG? Well, for me, it's a meme. I'm like not cool enough on the memesterism. Sorry.
Yeah, me neither. Okay.
Ski says a meme. That's pretty. You guys are pulling my leg. You're making fun of me. You're trying to set me up the bomb. I think, right? Set me up the bomb. Is that how the kids say it these days?
The best paper RPG. You know, honestly, I never did play one particular RPG and just say that follow those rules. I mixed and matched. I think I combined Boot Hill, D&D, Star Trek, Star Wars, and then I made up my own game called Time Traveler, and that's what I played when I was a kid.
Just so you guys know, yeah, it is so 2004. I'm an oldster. My beard is turning gray. It's okay. So this is Ryzel's got a good one. Besides the funding of the game, what's the other super problem you discovered in making it? So yeah, any other challenges that you faced? Anything scary?
Other super problem you've encountered making the game? I would say that the scariest thing is, although luckily there's things coming down the pipe that will fix that. There's dozens of problems like this we had to solve in Consortium. There's only 1 or 2 of that kind of problem with the tower, and one of them is the ultimate final solution for the in-person choreography stuff. So when you're talking to people, what drives their facial animations and their phonemes and their facial expressions and their body gestures and that kind of stuff. We had the Source Engine face poser tool for that, and you know, there's a bunch of different things on the drawing board for how we're going to do it for the tower. We haven't fully 100% committed to one of them yet, so that's definitely my biggest, the biggest issue, long-term issue I need to solve for getting the game done. But the other thing is just building the tower itself. It's a very interesting level design challenge. It's building upon everything I know about how to make levels, and it's using a technique I've never seen used before. So I would say that's certainly
Cool.
for me a big challenge. Yeah.
So we're gonna do Cyril Leaf has reframed the question, so we'll answer that one, and then Ski has one we'll do, and then we're gonna shut her down there, I think. So Cyril Leaf says, how do you go about solving clashing opinions while working on the game between team members?
It's really really fantastic question. Yeah. For me,
how do you do it?
Yeah. Essentially, I arbitrate. So I try to figure the essence of what both people want. Often I'll find that they're actually in sync and they don't realize it. But if there's some kind of fundamental thing there, I will again fully attempt to understand why they feel that way, and then do my damnedest to try to align them with often there's just a misunderstanding. To be frank, the vast majority of the misunderstanding. So I will just sort of smooth those over, because there hasn't been cases yet where it's been anything other than that. To be honest with you, because I've pulled together a team that believes in the vision of what we're making, and everybody sort of sees the same game. So there really isn't any fundamental. There hasn't been any fundamental disagreements at all yet. So I hope there's not any. Knock on wood as we move forward.
All right, and then what's the other one? Let's see. Anything you want to do, you can do due to technical limitations. Is there any sort of stuff you want to disclose in that regard?
I think it's too early to say, but I would say almost no actually to that, because the Unreal 4 engine is friggin' amazing, and there's pretty much nothing so far that we know we want to do that we feel like we're not going to be able to do. That I can think of, to be honest. We're all the pre-production work we did. We know exactly what the engine is capable of doing and not doing. So we haven't put forth stuff that we know we can't do at all. So
cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. All right. Well, I think we're done. I mean, thanks for all the vigorous conversation in the chat thing. It's nice to see everyone kind of engaged and up for it. Jesse, any final words?
No, you guys. You guys said a lot. I have nothing to add to this. You guys are great. I appreciate everything. You guys are great for not only doing your individual talks and words of wisdom, but also your, Greg Squared here. We're talking about it. We've learned a lot. I know a lot of people were involved and wanting to be chatting with you here. I kind of watched the chat and all that, and throughout the days, and a lot of people were going, "Oh, hey, I can't wait to be able to see Greg talking to Greg," that kind of thing. So
well,
everything.
I have to say that Greg Z, you are awesome, man. You rock.
Me too. I mean, I'm really looking forward to playing Tower. So it's exciting. I mean, working on that, it's difficult, so I can't wait to see you guys come up with.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we're kicking ass, and we all feel the same way. So every day towards that goal. Thanks a lot, Brian. I really appreciate it. Yeah. It was actually really fun chatting with you. Really fun. Maybe hope to do it again sometime.
Yeah, you bet. Take it easy, and I'll see you around.
Yeah, man. Awesome. Bye. Everybody, thanks a lot for coming out. You guys are all cool.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks, Greg.
Hey, man,
I'll let you choose which order that was in.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Cheers, everybody.
Have a great one.
Yeah.